Hey, needs? We got a problem.
Well, the title doesn't lie, because this week the prize was the return of fucking Trevor Phillips, aka Simon.
Bullshit!
I'm joshing slightly, but truth be told, this was the first episode of the season that I found a little criticism in, but thankfully it came down to the direction and lack of gore. But in that as well, it also remained consistent with the one fundamental aspect that has worked so well within the confines of the cinematic cornucopia.
Oh, I'm definitely interested.
We start this one returning to a time before this, with Simon approaching Negan over a situation regarding the Croat.
Hey, Simon. Welcome back to the land of the living.
Who is revealed to have just tortured a young girl to death that both Negan and Cy take issue with, as it goes against direct orders and demonstrates how unhinged he is. And this of course is referencing the moment Negan ran the Croat away from the Saviours and took part of his ear with him.
Nice hat. Thanks! I was being sarcastic. Well, I stole your face!
Back in the present day, the survivors are gearing up to infiltrate the garden when they're visibly concerned for Luther's whereabouts, but Negan speaks out and tells them to put it out of their heads for now, feeding the idea that he didn't agree with the mission anyway, so possibly bailed. They agree to press on while we get an awesome scene between Maggie and Negan almost bantering between each other before she shoots that down real quick, likely reminding herself that he's the enemy here. Whilst Negan tries to hide Luther's soothing cream that he took from him, and Maggie tries to conceal Negan's matches after burning Ginny's toy dinosaur.
And fuck you, bitch!
After a quick trek through the city, the group get inside the garden and check the old torture cells that the Croat used in the hopes of finding Herschel. However, after a rather blatant misdirect for audiences, they find no sign of him and devise the plan for Maggie to locate a getaway vehicle, while the survivors draw out the remaining enemy forces and Negan lures the Croat away to isolate his death. As Maggie and Negan are about to get things moving, she's about to inform him of Ginny's arrival in the city, but finds Luther's cream and throws judgment his way, acknowledging what he did, but Negan tells her to fuck off and stop pretending like she hasn't done shit she needs to explain as well.
And fuck you, bitch!
They then set off with the survivors discovering a barren arena, whilst Maggie tracks down a vehicle to get away in, but realises that Ginny has found a way inside as well, so sets off after her, and Negan begins to using the classical calling card to bait the Croat out after he left a young woman to place a disc in a player that sets a 5-minute timer. Where as we intercut with the timer ticking down, the group come to the realisation that they're alone, and the Croat pursues Negan throughout the building, who finds himself in the parking lot that Maggie was earlier, and he spots one of her hacking tools to jimmy a car to life, saving her from detection later and giving himself a weapon. And once the timer hits 0, candles were placed strategically on methane canisters stationed at the main entrances of the stadium, which blow the doors off and unleash the hordes that the Croat's men have been collecting for days to trap Maggie, Ginny and the others inside the main ring.
Well, that's fucking not good.
And as the fight begins, everyone but Maggie, Ginny, Amaya and Tommaso die, leaving the four to run for the only unlocked door they can find, with the only exit being into the sewers.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
Established earlier to contain the dead and sulphur, while Negan lures the Croat to the rafters for a brief chinwag, which ends with the Croat baiting Negan and reveals that he's been tracking all of his movements, even throughout the war against the Whisperers, and wonders, once all this is done, how does he know that the Widow won't just kill him for his previous transgressions?
No, he's got a point.
And as Negan demands to see him, we're given Pearlie instead of Herschel, who the Croat throws over the balcony, only for Negan to save him. But as they make their getaway, the Croat gets a piece of flesh, using the spring-loaded grapples to tear off some of Pearlie's skin.
Worthy adversary. 'Tis but a scratch.
And the pair manage to get away and out of the stadium to a nearby shoe shop, where Pearlie reverts to his programming, as it were, putting Negan under arrest and forgetting that they're in a far more compromising situation right now.
Good soldiers follow orders.
Now, quite honestly, I do have two gripes with this one, but otherwise it brilliantly continues the trend of compelling, thought-provoking, engaging pieces of television each week, and that pull on the heartstrings, get you glued, and enforces the feeling that The Walking Dead still has life.
It's alive! It's alive!
surrounding the linchpins at least of the flagship series, and really is what they should have given us all along. Now, I'm pressed for time this week, so I'll keep it brief, but as the other weeks have been, this one centres around Negan. The bastard stole the show again, though given how lackluster that arena fight was, it wasn't necessarily hard, but the expressions, internal conflict and existential crisis that our favourite anti-hero was going through here was fantastic.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
From the fear of confirming what you did to Luther, to checking the walker for Maggie, then the weakened barriers of confronting the Croat, to eventually saving Pauli, knowing what he could do to him, was exactly the type of gravitas I want to see from my protagonists. There's a concern for me that this could be closing the book of Negan by the end of the series, and while that wouldn't be the worst thing, to show Maggie at least that he was sincere this whole time and never strictly the bad guy that we knew him to be, I just want him to live happy as well, to have a chance at a new life, to find his wife and son and just settle down somewhere. But equally, the turmoil he's put through and being constantly forced to relive his past, whether through someone else's actions or have it switch on inside of him like a bad case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I cannot get enough of.
There's something on your face! It was pain!
Jeffrey Dean breathes so much life into this role that you just cannot get enough of him. There's such a rich conversation with the audience that unfolds every time we see him on screen, as here I love the discussion with the Croat that shows Negan's personal growth by hitting home the renouncement of his past life, only responding to the question of where Lucille's gone, which we saw in Season 10's finale where he signified the end of that life by burning the remnants of his bat and making peace with his losses, and simultaneously holding himself accountable for what he's done in life, trying to essentially heal and become that productive member of society that both Carl and Rick wanted. The degrees of depth and nuance are unlike any other when it comes to Negan, and I'm grateful that we get to sign off on this character if things head the way that I believe they will right now. To see him save his enemy in Pauli is a sign of understanding and strength that it takes to be the better man, like we saw with Rick do for him, closing out on the all-out war or all-out snore depending on where you sat regarding Season 7 and 8, and I'm curious to see how that side of things will play out in this unlikely pairing as we begin the third act next week, let alone the war against the ashes of his legacy, with the Croat seemingly wishing to finish this one once and for all, which was an extremely well conducted segment, and generally he's starting to become a convincing threat, demonstrated when the two reunite, as symbolically the Croat is on top right now with the monopoly over Manhattan and has improved upon the structural tactics employed by Negan originally, even going as far as to get a bigger sanctuary. But what separates Negan is what he's done for Pauli here. He proves you don't always need to be on top to show that you're made for this world and that change can start with you. He confronts himself in a sense when facing the Croat, who visually tries to bring them both down by latching onto Pauli for a moment with the grapple hook, and pressing Negan for answers about Lucille, to which Negan says nope and gets out of there with another enemy in tow, sacrificing the moment everyone needed to move on freely in life for the life of another, truly completes his hero's journey. Now it will be a case of can he work with the enemy of his enemy to kill his enemy.
This is not my arm.
But closing out on this one, we must wrap up the discussion over Negan by talking about Maggie's interactions here. We saw in this that Maggie is starting to treat Negan like an equal for a moment before later shutting that down, believing him still to be the same sociopathic killer that he always was. The tension is fierce and the animosity is palpable between the pair, but we're starting to see they're perfect partners in crime, as whether knowingly or not, they're able to converse without opening their mouths at this stage, as they've studied each other's motives, quirks and reactions long enough to generate an unspoken language between them, and it works so well with Lauren and Jeffrey working seamlessly off each other, as we see with her brief banterous moment at the beginning, then to discovering the walker with Negan and almost coming clean over her involvement with Ginny's toy. The two are intrinsically linked from here on out, and it's making for such a fascinating dynamic that I'm eagerly sat rocking back and forth to see how this plays out. And whilst Negan has a mission to fulfill in the hopes that this could settle the ground beneath them, with Maggie being the only only demon that he's yet to exorcise from his life, Maggie is on the edge of unbalance, where she has failed to understand the lack of distinction between them, continually judging him without acknowledging her own shortcomings, and developing a sense of self-awareness that in a similar situation they both do the same thing. A point we saw confirmed in the show's final season as well, just mercilessly killing Leah's men, having sided with Negan in that moment. A moment I believe that the two bonded with after some hair-raising encounters before this. She has to break down those walls towards him and acknowledge what he wants from this will work for her as well, and that ultimately is peace.
Yeah, peace. I love peace. I'll be out of a job with peace.
The greatest gift to her was taken, and almost thanks to her actions, one of the greatest gifts from him was taken as well. Now we have an opportunity to settle this feud in the most cathartic way, where it comes down to saving the children. Ginny isn't Negan's, but they've been together long enough to generate a paternal connection, and Herschel is not only Maggie's son, but the last connection she has to Glenn. So, Negan has a chance here, provided he can get Pearlie to come around to save her son and return him to her, while she can save face by returning Ginny to him and offer refuge to them both by way of apology, but that would confirm to Negan that she is in fact no different to him. So for the safety of everyone, the best result is for either Negan to meet his maker here in a modest way, or for a peaceful resolution that allows for them to finally put this to bed. They both brought kids into this unknowingly, but the resolution could be the shared interest to protect the future and ensure these kids have the best chance, whilst extinguishing any traces of the saviors. To close out though, my two gripes with this one is the use of the survivors and the arena fight itself. Whilst the entire sequence was well shot and composed, the tension was non-existent, and part of that came from the poor decisions everyone was making. Like knowing that there's a cage right behind them that will give you a chance to pop a few walkers off in between the bars, but instead you just try and fight them on the outside with the most sluggish and disengaging way.
Who's the dumbass?
Whoa! Hey, how about a little professional courtesy here?
What's that, dumbass?
Say it again.
You want me to?
I dare you.
Dumbass.
The fight just didn't wow me like previous moments have, as I was just yelling at the screen, get into the fucking cage and give yourself a minute. But instead we kiss goodbye to basically every unnamed character, and in pitiful ways too, with no gore to signify the danger of this moment, and it had a misdirect that felt woefully unnecessary with Tommaso in the end, all adding up to possibly the weakest segment of the entire season so far. And I mentioned that the lack of gore was consistent with what we've had so far in the season, where they've been using it sparingly and only used the graphic nature of the series like this to add weight to a moment or emphasize the dangers around them, rather than being self-indulgent, but I wouldn't have minded something here to highlight the threat they're in. However, despite all that, this week was an excellent continuation, and as we gear up for the final two installments, I'm still compelled to tune in each week, as I hope that you are as well. The dialogue was restrained and considerate, the expressions were everything here, and the acting was solid. The return of Simon was a welcome sight, and even though I feel this is the weakest of the season so far, it is absolutely still a worthy watch. That's going to do it for me for this week though, everyone. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you like what you saw here, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe for more like this, and until next time everyone, take care, and I will see you soon.